Mahoraga, one of the most intimidating foes in the entirety of the JJK universe. The most powerful Shikigami that belongs to the 10 Shadows technique, whose ability of adaptation allows it to adapt to any phenomena it ever encounters. A Shikigami with such ridiculous amounts of power that no 10 Shadows user outside of Sukuna has ever tamed it. And therefore the summoning of Mahoraga by a 10 Shadows user is basically the 10 Shadows user saying, hey, we're both gonna die here. What if Mahoraga's undefeated stretch against 10 Shadows users had less to do with its ridiculous amounts of power and more to do with the Zenin squandering their own? See, it's no secret that heavenly restriction runs in the Zenin family. See, whether it's Toji, Monkey, or now Tsurugi, heavenly restriction, at least the kind that erases your cursed energy and makes you super fast and strong, is really only something we've ever seen pop up in the Zenin clan. Mekamaru had the kind where you have glass bones and paper skin and 1.5 limbs, but because of that you have an insane amount of cursed energy. Heavenly restrictions go both ways. But what if the reason that heavenly restriction, at least the kind that wipes out your cursed energy, only appears in the Zenin clan is because it was up to those heavenly restriction users to help the 10 Shadows users defeat Mahoraga? But Nick, wouldn't that nullify the contracts made with Mahoraga, as technically only the 10 Shadows user is able to defeat Mahoraga if they ever want hopes of controlling him one day? Well, maybe, but also maybe not. And that's a question we hope to answer today, because today we're talking Mahoraga's biggest weakness revealed. But before we get to revealing anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And if you're looking for one additional Nick video every single week, guys, you can go ahead and find my Naruto reaction series using the fourth wall link in my description below. We're on to we're almost at the final fights of the Chunin, not of the go to the series. Before we get into all that, I want to talk to you about the sponsor of today's video, BetterHelp. Listen, it's a brand new year, and there's some resolutions you should never quit on. Well, yes, it might be hard to get up and go to the gym every day or cut down on carbs. When it comes down to it, bettering your mental health and promises you make to yourself to better your mental health are the most important kind of promises you can make. A real change doesn't come from becoming somebody new. It comes from small, consistent changes that grow into habits over time. Over the past couple of years, I've started to become more appreciative of what I've built in terms of a media empire, and it's made me much more appreciative of how far I've come in my content creation journey. But I couldn't have done that without therapy, or the sponsor of today's video, BetterHelp. See, the therapist that I was connected with through BetterHelp helped me realize that any mental health journey is not a quick fix, but the building of a consistent habit that leads to steady growth, that allows for me to build long-lasting support for myself that makes my mental health journey a lot easier. And I want to see you embarking on your mental health journeys as well. And so does BetterHelp, which is why they make it so incredibly easy to get started. See, all you need to do to get started with BetterHelp is fill out a questionnaire. And after you fill out that questionnaire, you'll be connected with a therapist that BetterHelp believes is perfect for you, based off your preferences, their specialty, and BetterHelp's decades of matchmaking experience. But if that glass slipper isn't fitting just right, BetterHelp not only makes switching therapists easy, but also free. And thus there's never been a better time to join the 6 million plus people who have already started their mental health journeys with the help of BetterHelp. So go ahead and click the link in my description or go to betterhelp.com/weebcommander to get 10% off your first month of therapy. Every journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. So I don't know if there's ever been a better time to talk about this topic, a topic that brings together both Mahoraga and heavenly restriction users. Because, well, in the anime, the most recent episode of JJK we got was episode 3 of season 3, which was Maki versus the Zenin clan. And currently in the manga, that is, say, in Majulo, the sequel manga to JJK, Mahoraga is one of the mainstays as it battles against Dabura, the main antagonist of the story. And therefore, fortunately, just a couple of days ago, somebody reached out to me over email and brought this theory to my desk. A theory that posited that the Zenin clan had been squandering their own chances to become the strongest out of the royal Jujutsu clans by disregarding their genetic disposition for heavenly restriction users. And when I say genetic disposition, I mean it. We've actually seen more heavenly restriction users from the Zenin clan than we've seen 10 Shadows users. And yet only 10 Shadows users are referred to with the reverence of having the inherited technique. With the current iteration of the Zenin clan, that is to say, the iteration of the Zenin clan that existed before Maki killed all of them, respecting the 10 Shadows technique so much that Naobito, the former head of the Zenin clan, elected to make Megumi the next head of the Zenin clan, even though he had been raised outside of the Zenin clan. Even though Maki, especially with her fully realized Heavenly Restriction could kill Megami in a matter of seconds, and was very much hammered home in the manga, less so in the anime just because of how much was going on. It was hard to process the information that was being given to us during episode 3 of season 3. But anyways, it was very much hammered home in the manga that the Zenin clan was currently spiraling its way towards being the weakest out of the 3 Jujutsu royal clans because of their disregard of Toji. Ranta, the guy who uses the eyeball-related gravity Jujutsu, said that while trying to hold down Maki. Fun fact, Ranta's like canonically the only good member of the Zenin clan, which is why Maki doesn't kill him. That's why he just kind of dies of chronic case of bloody eye. But Ranta saying this, and Maki exterminating the entire clan by herself, and Toji, one of the strongest members of the Zenin clan ever, who was able to intimidate people like Naoya, are all supposed to hammer home the fact that Heavenly Restriction is one of, if not the most powerful things that comes from the Zenin clan. And yet the Zenin, because they believe in cursed energy over everything else, a conversation Oji literally has with Maki after he slices her down using his cursed energy sword, as he tells her that her trying to strip herself of cursed energy to get stronger is worthless on account of the fact that Jujutsu sorcerers have the ability to strengthen their bodies using cursed energy, is a fundamentally flawed principle because the strength, speed, and ability to escape fate and domain expansions that comes along with a complete Heavenly Restriction far outweighs the strength that the majority of sorcerers are ever able to achieve. But Nick, how does any of this help a Heavenly Restriction user help a 10 Shadows user tame Mahoraga? Well, let's get into it. The most important thing to know about how Heavenly Restriction works heading into this video is that Heavenly Restriction users operate outside of the bounds of cursed energy. This means their movements can't be tracked by monitoring their cursed energy, which is the way that most sorcerers are able to predict the movements of their opponents. It means they're invisible to sure-hit aspects of domain expansions, like how Maki was invisible to Sukuna's domain expansion on account of the fact that she didn't have cursed energy that could be targeted, which obviously is a necessity if you want any Heavenly Restriction user to be even remotely relevant at the top of the power scheme of the universe, because if you have no cursed energy, then you can't open your own domain expansion, and you can't use simple domain to try and defend yourself in a domain expansion. So if you ever wanted a Heavenly Restriction user to be able to fight against somebody with a domain expansion, they'd have to be unaffected by the domain expansion, which we also see come into play when Toji rips his way into Dagon's domain expansion. But Heavenly Restriction users' separation from cursed energy goes further than just not being targeted by sure-hit effects of domain expansions and not having cursed energy to track in combat, as Heavenly Restriction users also exist outside of the bounds of fate. See, we learned from Tengen in episode 2 of season 3, or way back in the manga during the Perfect Preparation arc, that a 6-Eyes user and a plasma vessel are always born at the same time. And that same time is always to ensure that the 6-Eyes user is around to protect the plasma vessel so that the 6-Eyes user can get the plasma vessel to Tengen in time for Tengen to merge with said plasma vessel. Fate is very much a thing that exists in the JJK universe. However, Kenjaku's been trying to destroy that fate for like 1,000 years. And Kenjaku's even gone so far as to kill the 6-Eyes user while they were still a baby to ensure that they wouldn't be around to escort the Star Plasma vessel to Tengen in time for Tengen to merge with them, leading to Tengen becoming a cursed spirit of sorts and creating a scenario in which Tengen would be able to merge with the entirety of Japan. However, after Kenjaku killed a little baby Gojo, before Gojo obviously, a new 6-Eyes user was simply born somewhere else in the Gojo clan, and thus Kenjaku became aware of the fact Jujutsu, or cursed energy, deals in the field of fate, and therefore no matter how many 6-Eyes users he tried to kill, there would always be a new one to escort the Star Plasma vessel, which is why Kenjaku had to get somebody who isn't dictated by fate, and that somebody was Toji Zenin. See, Toji Zenin is somebody who's completely separated from cursed energy, doesn't fall within the purview of cursed energy's prediction, and therefore Toji was able to kill Riko Aminai, the Star Plasma vessel that was supposed to merge with Tengen, in a way that nobody's fateful projections could have predicted. And therefore, not only do Heavenly Restriction users have the ability to not be targeted by domain expansions and use their ridiculous speed to speed blitz Jujutsu sorcerers because they can't track their cursed energy, but they also fall outside of the boundaries of fate. And therefore, it's not that crazy to assume that a Heavenly Restriction user could enter into the ritualistic summoning of Mahoraga and help a 10 Shadows user without without nullifying the contract. See, because it's established when Maki finds herself within the confines of Sukuna's domain expansion after ridding herself of all cursed energy. To Sukuna's domain expansion, Maki is the same as a car, an inanimate object, and therefore if a heavenly restriction user fought alongside a 10 Shadows user in the battle against Mahoraga, even if the heavenly restriction user was to deal the final blow against Mahoraga, it would kind of just be like if some gigantic inanimate object like a boulder fell on top of Mahoraga and squished it, which obviously for the sake of taming Mahoraga wouldn't invalidate the contract. I mean, after all, we've seen multiple people who have fought against Mahoraga throw giant rocks at it. And therefore, if hypothetically one of those giant rocks did do the job and finally killed the Obstapa, it's not like for some random reason the fact that you involve the building is going to invalidate you taming Mahoraga. But I know what some of you are thinking right now. Oh, Nick, that's all well and good, but Mahoraga would just adapt to the physical combat of a heavenly restriction user like that. I mean, sure, heavenly restriction users are fast, and yeah, they're strong, but anything less than completely eviscerating Mahoraga on a cellular level on account of the fact that Mahoraga has a ridiculous ability to heal itself from even the smallest tiny cluster of cells like we currently are seeing in Majula won't be enough to take out Mahoraga, and therefore there's really nothing that a heavenly restriction user who doesn't have any kind of big boom attack is gonna be able to do against Mahoraga. And well, like maybe, yeah, you can make the argument that no heavenly restriction user has ever shown the kind of firepower required to kill Mahoraga. We're not trying to make the point today that a heavenly restriction user would win in a 1v1 against Mahoraga. We're just trying to make the point today that the Zenin clan was inherently set up because of how fate works in the JJK universe to have the heavenly restriction user help the 10 Shadows user tame the strongest Shikigami in their arsenal. While we're at it, let's try and make the point that a heavenly restriction user could win in a fight against Mahoraga. Because yes, we know that Mahoraga adapts to any and all phenomena it interacts with. If Sukuna attacks Mahoraga with a dismantle or a cleave, Mahoraga doesn't just begin adapting to the concept of cleave or dismantle, but adapting to all slicing attacks, period. So even if Sukuna just hit Mahoraga with a couple of dismantles and never used cleave on Mahoraga, which was the stronger of his 2 cutting attacks, then Mahoraga, just because it adapted to dismantle, would also adapt to cleave. And the same kind of goes for physical combat, as we just in the most recent chapter of Majula saw Dabra come to the conclusion that Mahoraga most likely adapts to straightforward physical combat, like fist-to-fist kind of combat, faster than it does to a complicated technique like his light-based projectile. And as fist kicks and swords are kind of all that heavenly restriction users can use, well then it seems that they would be a terrible matchup for Mahoraga. Because assuming that Mahoraga wasn't already adapted to blunt force attacks like punches or kicks, after a couple of punches or kicks from a heavenly restriction user that don't kill Mahoraga, well, their entire arsenal is nullified. Not to mention that Mahoraga adapts to everything about the phenomena it encounters. It doesn't just adapt to slashing attacks, it also adapts to the speed of those slashing attacks and the strength of those slashing attacks. So if you don't kill Mahoraga quickly, whatever benefit you had in terms of speed and strength over Mahoraga is pretty much immediately nullified. Everything, and I mean everything, we've ever seen Mahoraga adapt to, that being Sukuna's slashing attacks, Gojo's blue, Gojo's domain expansion, Infinite Void, Dabura's light-based projectiles, everything we've ever seen Mahoraga adapt to has had cursed energy in some way or another. Even Dabura increasing his speed to close the speed of light was something he was only able to do because of his control over cursed energy. And while it's not cursed energy, it comes from Samiria, it's basically cursed energy. They've been hammering home the fact that it's cursed energy. And thus there's really no precedent for Mahoraga to adapting to something without cursed energy, considering the fact that Mahoraga is a Shikigami and therefore completely made out of cursed energy, and its adaptation technique is a cursed technique. If we take into consideration the fact that heavenly restriction users have shown the ability to be outside of the effect of sure hit effects like domain expansions because of their lack of cursed energy, it's not crazy to assume that Mahoraga's adaptation to any and all phenomena is tied to Mahoraga interacting with the cursed energy of the phenomena, something not only backed backed up by heavenly restriction users inherently having an advantage over domain expansion users, but also something backed up by heavenly restriction users existing outside of the purview of the predictions of cursed energy. And I mean, think about it. Like we said earlier in this video, the idea that the Zenin clan has been throwing away their heavenly restriction users has always been identified as a mistake. Because the Zenin clan threw away Toji, he turned to a life of crime, and he was able to be bought by Kenjaku to essentially be the starting gun for Kenjaku's plan to merge all of Japan into one gigantic hive mind. But more than that, the Zenin's ideology of cursed energy over anything led to a corrupt ruling class of the Hiei that eventually threw Maki and Mai out of their family, which led to Mai's demise and Maki's rise as the only remaining member of the Zenin clan, as she killed everybody else. But what if, kind of like how a Six Eyes user and a Star Plasma vessel are always born around the same time in order to get that Star Plasma vessel over to Tengen so that Tengen can merge with them, a Ten Shadows user is always born around the same time as a heavenly restriction user. See, there is undoubtedly a connection between the two. Toji, after all, was the person who fathered Megumi, and therefore if Toji wasn't turned away by the Zenin clan, not only probably would have been the head of the Zenin clan on account of the fact that he was by far and away the strongest member of the Zenin clan, he also would have been around to hypothetically help Megumi tame Mahoraga. However, because Toji is killed by Gojo after killing Rika Amanai, another heavenly restriction user has to come into the fold, because kind of like how if you kill the Six Eyes user while they're still a baby, a new one will be born to escort the Star Plasma vessel. With now no heavenly restriction user to accompany the Ten Shadows user, a new one had to be made. However, fortunately, unlike with the Six Eyes, a heavenly restriction user doesn't necessarily have to be born a heavenly restriction user, so long as over the course of their lifetime they're able to eventually rid themselves of all cursed energy. Like how Maki, who was born an identical twin alongside Mai, who unfortunately had a little bit of cursed energy, was able to rid herself of all cursed energy when Mai died, as Mai took all of her cursed energy with her. Identical twins are viewed as the same person within the eyes of Jujutsu, and therefore so long as Mai existed with a little bit of cursed energy, Maki could never achieve full heavenly restriction. And thus my point holds that with Toji now gone, Maki would have to step up as the next heavenly restriction user in Fate's timeline to possibly help the Ten Shadows user tame Mahoraga. But once again, on account of the fact that Maki was ostracized from the Zenin clan, and Toji was ostracized from the Zenin clan, which led to him taking Megumi along with him, Maki and Megumi were never close to each other in terms of familial raising. So Maki wasn't able to help Megumi, and thus this idea that the Zenin's obsession with cursed energy over everything, and Ronta saying in his final moments, as canonically the only good member of the Zenin, mind you, that we as the Zenin clan are in this position because we tossed out Toji, aligns perfectly with this ideology that the Zenin's obsession with cursed energy actually drove them away from their fate of having the strongest ever Ten Shadows user. However, I believe we might actually be heading towards that fate being rectified, because right now, for the first time in the history of the Zenin clan, because it's no longer happening in the Zenin clan, a Ten Shadows user is existing side by side with a heavenly restriction user, Yuka and Tsurugi in Majulo. Yes, like I said, they're no longer a part of the Zenin clan, as the Zenin clan was absorbed into the Gojo clan because Maki was the only surviving Zenin outside of Megumi, who probably married Hana and then didn't have kids. I don't know. We didn't get a whole lot of backstory on Potential Man. But this hammers home the idea that a heavenly restriction user and a Ten Shadows user are always born in the same generation, as Tsurugi was literally born first so he could protect and guide the Ten Shadows user of his generation, which ended up being his sister, who was 1 year younger than him. And therefore I believe that in the future chapters of Majulo, it'll actually maybe be up to a combined effort of Tsurugi and Yuka working together to defeat and tame Mahoraga, finally allowing for the Zenin clan to live up to the entirety of their potential, potentially too late. But moralistically, this would align with Jujutsu Kaisen, as it would show that the Zenin clan were wrong in their approach to throw out the heavenly restriction users, and not until that worst possible version of the Zenin clan was completely destroyed by one of those heavenly restriction users could they live up to the potential they were always meant to. But I'm curious to hear from you guys. Do you believe a heavenly restriction user could help a Ten Shadows user in the extermination of Mahoraga? Let me know in the comments below, and while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Now, if you'll excuse me, it's time to go film an episode of Otaku's Anonymous.